The match lasted 3 hours and 20 minutes. It was longer than some NBA games, longer than most feature films, longer than anyone in stadium court at Hard Rock Stadium had anticipated when Eala walked onto the court as the 31st seed, ready to defend the 390 ranking points that had launched her into the global spotlight exactly 1 year ago. But what made this marathon unforgettable wasn't just the duration, it was what happened in between. It was the moment Eala stood at the baseline, racket in hand, watching her opponent walk away just as she was about to serve. It was the complaint that followed, the heated exchange with the chair umpire, the realization that Laura Siegemund, the 38-year-old German veteran who has made a career out of pushing boundaries, was using every trick in the book to disrupt her rhythm. And it was the moment when the 20-year-old Filipina, down a set, exhausted and frustrated beyond measure, decided she had had enough. What followed was a comeback that left Siegemund stunned, the tennis world buzzing, and Eala proving that no amount of gamesmanship can stop someone who refuses to lose. Before Eala even stepped onto the court at Hard Rock Stadium, she knew what she was walking into. Laura Siegemund has been on the WTA Tour since 2006, a crafty veteran who has won 3 Grand Slam doubles titles and built a career on experience, guile, and a willingness to use every advantage the rulebook, and sometimes the gray areas outside it, affords. At 38 years old, she is old enough to have been playing professional tennis when Eala was still learning to hold a racket. But it wasn't just her longevity that preceded her. It was the stories, the warnings from fellow players who had faced the German and walked off the court frustrated, angry, and sometimes in tears. The most famous incident came at the 2023 U.S. Open, when a teenage Coco Gauff found herself trapped in a first-round battle against Siegemund that would test her patience as much as her tennis. Gauff, now a Grand Slam champion and one of the most composed players on tour, lost her cool that day. She marched to the umpire's chair and delivered a tirade that revealed just how deep Siegemund's tactics had cut. "She's never ready when I'm serving," Gauff fumed, her voice rising with frustration. "She went over the clock like 4 times. You gave her a time violation once. How is this fair?" Gauff explained that she had been counting 7 times. 7 times Siegemund had exceeded the 25-second shot clock without consequence. "I've been quiet the whole match. I didn't even clap for the time violation, but she's been missing for like 6 points. I didn't say nothing, but now it's ridiculous. I don't care what she's doing on her serve. My serve, she has to be ready." Siegemund defended herself that day, claiming Gauff was rushing through her service routine, leaving her little time to reset or reach for her towel. But the crowd jeered, and the reputation stuck. Now, 2.5 years later, Eala was about to experience the same frustration, the same delays, the same gamesmanship, The match began exactly as Eala had drawn it up. She came out firing, her aggressive baseline play pushing Siegemund to the defensive from the opening rally. Her down-the-line backhand winners were finding their mark. Her serve was holding firm. Within minutes, she had raced to a 3-0 lead, and Stadium Court was alive with the energy of thousands of Filipino fans who had packed the stands. But Siegemund has been winning matches for nearly 2 decades, and she wasn't about to fold just because a 20-year-old was hitting winners. The German veteran began to find her rhythm, mixing in net approaches, forcing extended rallies, and slowly clawing her way back into the set. The tactics weren't just physical. Between points, Siegemund moved deliberately, sometimes glacially. She adjusted her strings, wiped her face, walked to the back of the court, and seemed to find every possible reason to delay the next point. The 25-second shot clock that governs professional tennis was being tested repeatedly and mostly ignored by the chair umpire. Eala felt her momentum slipping. The 3-0 lead became 3-1, then 3-2, then 4-4. The set that should have been hers was slipping away, and she could feel the frustration building with every delayed point. Still, she fought. She held set points, 4 of them in fact, including one at 6-5 in the tiebreak. Each time, Siegemund found a way to survive. Each time, the delay between points stretched longer. And when the tiebreak finally ended at 8-6 in Siegemund's favor, the first set had taken 84 minutes, longer than some entire matches. Eala walked to her chair, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. She had been the better player. She had led. The second set began with both players holding serve, but the tension that had been building throughout the first set was about to boil over. It happened at 2-1, 30-15, with Eala preparing to serve. She tossed the ball, but something was off. Her motion faltered, and the ball fell harmlessly to the court. It was a routine missed toss, the kind that happens a dozen times in any match. But Siegemund saw an opportunity. The German walked toward the back of the court, turned her back to the net, and raised a complaint to the chair umpire. The exact words weren't picked up by microphones, but the body language was unmistakable. She was accusing Eala of something, perhaps of taking too long, perhaps of gamesmanship herself. Eala's reaction was immediate. She approached the umpire's chair, her face flushed, her voice steady but carrying the unmistakable edge of frustration. "Can you watch her time?" Eala asked, her words deliberate, "because many times she's delaying." The chair umpire, a veteran official who had seen this dynamic play out before, responded evenly. "The time has been watched, and she knows, and you as well. You need to be careful of the clock." Eala wasn't satisfied. "I was about to serve," she said, pointing out that she had been ready, that it was Siegemund who had stopped the flow of play. The umpire acknowledged her point, but reminded her that she had 6 seconds left on the shot clock. "That's what I explained to her, but both of you need to have a look at the clock." But Eala wasn't finished. "Yeah, but she stopped the point. I was about to serve and she turned around." Siegemund, listening from the baseline, interjected. "It's not about the time," she said. "It's about the focus." The exchange was brief, but its impact was lasting. Eala had done something that many players hesitate to do. She had called out an opponent's tactics directly, publicly, and without apology. She had let Siegemund know that she saw what was happening and that she wasn't going to accept it quietly. And then, as the confrontation ended, something shifted. The frustration that had been building inside Eala for nearly 2 hours didn't disappear. It transformed. It became fuel. It became focus. It became the fire that would carry her through the... As the second set progressed, the broadcast statistics flashed on the screen, revealing what everyone watching had suspected. The delays weren't just in Eala's imagination. During the second set, Eala exceeded the 25-second shot clock on 57% of her service points. That number was high, higher than her usual pace, certainly a reflection of the tension and the extended rallies. But Siegemund's number was staggering. The 38-year-old German exceeded the shot clock on 85% of her service points. 8 out of every 10 times she served, she pushed past the time limit, often by significant margins, with minimal consequences from the chair umpire. The numbers told a story that the eye test had already confirmed. Siegemund was deliberately, systematically, and repeatedly slowing the pace of the match. She was using the gray areas of the rulebook to disrupt Eala's rhythm, to frustrate her opponent, to gain an advantage that had nothing to do with tennis skill. This was the same pattern that had enraged Coco Gauff at the 2023 US Open. "It's like a thing," Gauff had said afterward. "I really don't like confrontation all that much. I wasn't sure if I was in the right or not until it happened multiple times. Then I was like, okay, I know I'm in the right." Now Eala was experiencing the same frustration, the same helplessness, the same feeling of being trapped in someone else's rhythm, forced to play at someone else's pace, waiting for the umpire to enforce rules that seemed to have no teeth. But unlike Gauff's experience at the US Open, where the controversy overshadowed her victory, Eala was about to write a different ending. With the confrontation behind her, Eala stepped to the baseline for what would become the most important game of the match. She held serve to take a 2-1 lead in the second set, but she wasn't just holding, she was dominating. The break came in the third game. Siegemund, perhaps rattled by Eala's willingness to confront her, perhaps simply unable to maintain the level that had carried her through the first set, faltered. Eala pounced, breaking the German serve and taking a 3-1 lead that would prove insurmountable. From there, the set was all Eala. She won 3 of the last 5 games, closing it out 6-3 with a pair of love holds that left no doubt about who was in control. The third set was even more decisive. Eala raced to a 2-0 lead, breaking Siegemund's serve with an aggressive return game that left the German scrambling. Siegemund answered with a break of her own in the third game, a brief moment of hope for the veteran. But Eala was done playing games. She broke back immediately, then held through 3 deuces to stretch her lead to 4-1. At 5-2 with the finish line in sight, Siegemund saved 2 match points to cut the deficit to 5-3, but it was only a delay. Serving for the match at 5-3, Eala showed the composure of a player far beyond her 20 years. She stayed steady, her shot-making precise, her focus unbreakable. When the final point landed, when Siegemund's return found the net, Eala raised her arms in victory, not with celebration, but with relief. The final score, 6-7, 6, 6-3, 6-3. 3 hours. As the crowd erupted, as the Filipino flags waved and the chants echoed through Stadium Court, Eala walked to the microphone for her on-court interview. The words that followed revealed the depth of what she had just accomplished. "It definitely was close," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion evident in her face. "Very demanding physically and mentally." But she wasn't complaining. She was reflecting on growth, on the journey that had brought her from a wild card ranked number 140 to a seeded player defending her place among the elite. But that was one of my goals last year after this tournament, was to improve physically, and here I am, fresh as a flower. The smile that followed was genuine, almost playful. She had just played the longest match of her career, faced an opponent who had tried everything to break her, and she was describing herself as fresh as a flower. Later in her press conference, she elaborated on what the victory meant. "It means a lot to me. It says a lot about my progress and how I've developed as a player and as a person," she said. She acknowledged the difficulty of facing someone like Siegemund, an opponent who forced her to dig deeper than she ever had before. "It really was close. It was demanding, physically and mentally, but that was one of my goals last year after the tournament, to improve physically, and here." The win over Siegemund wasn't just another victory in the first round of a tournament, it was a statement about who Eala is becoming. Entering Miami, the 390 points she earned from her magical 2025 semifinal run had already expired. Her ranking had dropped from number 29 to number 51 in the live rankings, a sobering reminder of how quickly success can fade. A loss to Siegemund would have dropped her another 22 places, pushing her out of the top 50 entirely and erasing much of the progress she had made over the past year. Instead, she now sits at number 47 in the live rankings, having gained 55 points for her victory. More importantly, she has kept herself firmly inside the top 50, with a chance to climb further as the tournament progresses. But the rankings, as Eala herself has said, are not what drives her. Her next opponent will be Magda Linette of Poland, who stunned world number 3 Iga Swiatek in the second round. The matchup represents another opportunity, another test, another chance to prove that her rise is no fluke. Eala's win over Siegemund also carried a symbolic weight that transcends rankings. She had faced an opponent who has built a reputation on pushing boundaries, who had frustrated some of the best players in the world, and she had not only survived, she had conquered. She had called out the tactics that others had endured silently. She had transformed frustration into fuel, and she had walked off the court not as the victim of gamesmanship, but as the player who refused to let it define her. "It means the world to me, and it tested out my progress," she said after the match. "I have improved as a person from last year." Eala walked onto Stadium Court at Hard Rock Stadium, facing more than just an opponent. She faced a reputation, a history, a player who had frustrated Grand Slam champions and pushed the boundaries of fair play to their breaking point. And for 3 hours and 20 minutes, she endured it all. The delays, the complaints, the moments when Siegemund turned her back just as Eala was about to serve, the frustration that built with every second the shot clock ran down and every minute the umpire failed to intervene. But when the final point landed, when Eala raised her arms in victory, the narrative had been rewritten. She hadn't just beaten Laura Siegemund, she had stared down every tactic, every delay, every attempt to break her focus, and she had refused to lose. "It really was close," she said afterward, demanding physically and mentally. "But that was one of my goals last year after the tournament, to improve physically, and here I am, fresh as a flower." Fresh as a flower? After the longest match of her career, after a German veteran had tried everything to wilt her, Alex Eala stood tall, and in doing so, she proved that the qualities that separate champions from contenders aren't just about forehands and backhands. They're about composure, about resilience, about refusing to let anyone else control your rhythm. Now she moves to the third round, where Magdalene awaits. The road only gets harder, but after what she just endured, nothing will seem impossible. Was Eala right to call out Siegemund's tactics? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to Rally Radar now for daily WTA news, match breakdowns, and stories that go beyond the scoreline. Because at Rally Radar, every day is match day.